Hello, we are talking about the practice of real estate. And this is another really big section of content. Salespeople, I think you're going to have at least 10 test questions on it. If you're studying for broker, I think you're in that 12 to 13 range. So let's add this up. We've done principles of agency. You got a good 10 questions there. You've got contracts. You've got a good 12 there. And now practice of real estate, you got another good 10. So if you look at that, you're at about 32 to 35 questions, which is more than half of what you need to get the minimum score of 56. So these three areas of study for you, I think are go-to, because if you nailed those three, if you could, you wouldn't need to know anything else and get past. Now, I want you to know more than that. But again, I know that we just, let's get the test over with. I understand. And I will say that these are probably the three hardest from my experience and from my students' experience in passing this exam. Practice of real estate is going to have really two big rocks, which is fair housing and antitrust laws. Those are going to be the two big ones. I would say fair housing, expect 4 to 5 test questions on that. Antitrust laws, I would expect 3 to 4. So right there, we're at our number for total number of questions on the exam. Now, this talks about trust accounts and the purpose. And this is really for the purpose of holding other people's money for a deposit that maybe they're going to earn back at the end of the lease. We don't spend that money, or when the lease is up, maybe the landlord wouldn't have it anymore, right? Or it's going to be for an earnest money deposit, possibly on a house. And again, that's got to be made available, because typically the buyer gets that as a credit at closing if they get to that process in the contract. So we do not want to commingle our general funds with these escrow funds. That is illegal. And again, I want you to know the term conversion. That's the verb of all of this. Now, fair housing laws and ADA. Let's talk about protected classes. You just need to memorize this list. I don't know what else to tell you. The Fair Housing Act of 1968 covers the following people: race and color, national origin, religion, sex, family status, and disability. It does not say age on here. There's a special category of housing for older persons, which is 55 and up. But know this list of protected classes, according to fair housing, is race, national origin, religion, sex, family status, and disability. Okay, that's the Civil Rights Act of 1968. Now, again, there is age is not a protected class on there. They do have their own special category for housing for older persons, which is 55 and older. I do think you need to know who administers the Fair Housing Act, and the answer is HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. I do want to take a few minutes, though, and dive in to some of these protected classes. And let's talk about family status. And I'm just going to read here the outline definition so that we can review this. A family can be as small as a single individual, or it can be defined as one or more individuals under 18 living with a parent or guardian. It includes a woman who is pregnant, And it includes anyone who is in the process of assuming custody of a child under 18. Again, housing that qualifies for older people is exempt. Otherwise, single or multifamily housing must be made available to families with children under the same terms and conditions applied to anyone else. Landlords and condominiums or cooperatives cannot restrict the number of occupants with the intent of eliminating families and children. So as long as the building code or the building certificate or occupancy of certificate of occupancy says that, for example, 6 people can live there, 6 people can live there. The landlord can't say 3 in an effort to get rid of so many children. It's also an instance where we can't have an elderly person say, I've rented here for 15 years and I'm getting sick and I need more rest and I don't want a noisy family living above me. You can't rent to a noisy family. A landlord is not able to do that. Under disability, this is anyone with a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more of a person's major life activities. A couple key things with this is, one, a person with AIDS is protected under this law. So you cannot discriminate and refuse housing to someone because they have AIDS. They are a protected class. A good source for you to research the why and the how behind that is the Ryan White story, who was a young, probably even preteen, who contracted AIDS through a blood transfusion and was not allowed to come back to school. And they went to federal court and determined that if schools make accommodations for wheelchairs and hearing impaired students, special diets, things of that nature, if they're making those accommodations, they could make the accommodations for Ryan to return to school. This is probably way before we even knew what HIV was and completely understood how it's contracted. And he won at a federal level, and that's why AIDS is a protected class, okay? The other thing that protects someone with a disability is someone who is currently in addiction recovery programs. So it doesn't protect the drug dealer, but it protects anyone that is in any sort of rehabilitation or recovery program from alcohol and drugs. Now, let's outline, though, what the landlord's responsibility is when working with a tenant with a disability. And the law says they must make reasonable accommodations. And reasonable accommodations could be allowing a pet in a no pets building, parking spots, adjusting light fixtures, adding handlebars or something like that, grab bars. The key is while the landlord's got to let them make reasonable accommodations, it can be at the expense of the disability tenant. It can be at their cost, and it can be required that they return the property back to its original condition, minus basic wear and tear. So the landlord is not on the hook for the expense. That can be passed along with the person with the disability. They cannot have their deposit increased. However, they can be required to put money in a reserve in a separate account. We cannot create a pet deposit just because they have a disability. But we can escrow money to return the carpet back to its original condition, with basic wear and tear. We just can't use it as an increase in deposit. It's got to be something separate. Now, here are our another big one that I see come up And that is religious organizations and how they're able to navigate housing for their own members. So religious organizations are allowed to offer housing to people who are members. They can just advertise that to their own members. However, they can't discriminate anything more than that. So if we've got United Methodist Church that's got a house that they are willing to rent to any of their members, that's where it stops. We can't just say all white Methodist, right? It's got to be open to any of their members. And then further into that, let's say we don't have any of our members that want to rent that unit or rent that property. Then we open it up commercially to everyone. Now we must follow all the fair housing laws. Now, here is who is exempt, to jump ahead on this list a little bit. You are exempt if you're doing a for sale by owner. It's the property you own. You are exempt then also if you do not use a real estate professional. And you are also exempt if you use no discriminatory advertising. So doing a for sale by owner, no discriminatory advertising, and not hiring a real estate agent, you're exempt from all of this. But the moment we hire a real estate professional, that's the number one thing. Game on, we must follow the fair housing laws. Okay. Now, a few other terms. Blockbusting. This is when we try to get sellers to leave by busting up the block, also known as panic selling, by saying things like, a protected class is going to move into your neighborhood, and once they do, it's going to be super noisy and the values of your property are going to be in half. Sell now. That's illegal. Steering is with buyers, and that's where we say, oh no, you don't want to live here. No. You want to live with your kind. Wouldn't you feel more comfortable living where other people like you live? That is steering, and that is illegal. Redlining refers to lending. And that is a lending policy that used to take place where lenders had maps with red lines on them. And if you were to award a loan to a minority within those red lines, you were known to be making a bad loan because it would reduce the values of the property in the neighborhoods. Again, that's a lending term, and that is highly illegal. If you're interested in more about redlining, I would say that there's a lot of great YouTube videos out there that really explain it, and from several different perspectives. There's also several great videos that you could find on the National Association of Realtors website. For those of you that maybe want to explore that a little bit further. Let me jump, though, into Americans with Disabilities Act. Again, this is not about housing unless it's for commercial purposes, such as leasing and advertising that it's handicap accessible. Otherwise, the main platform of it is so that people with disability have access to goods and services. So your retail and your shopping, and they have access to their employment. Okay, those are the two big things. I believe that was passed in 1990 under President George Herbert Walker Bush. Under advertising, I think some key things to keep in mind is, one, you can do where shared spaces are going to be involved. You can do female roommate seeking female roommate, for example. Another one to maybe keep in mind that would help you navigate is not advertising in a Spanish-speaking magazine, specifically if you don't normally advertise there. That gives the impression that you've got to be able to speak Spanish in order to buy that property. So another tip is comments when you're writing descriptions of a property. There could be a scenario like that comes up on the exam. Stick to the property, not the people who are going to buy it. So no close walk to church. That implies you've got to be able to walk with no disability and that you've got to be religious. So again, focus on the property, not the person, when you're navigating maybe through some questions like that. This does talk a little bit about the do not call list on here, which is a list of people who have been asked not to take in solicitation calls. Two more things I'm going to add here that are not on the list, though, that I've just made notes on. One is Megan's Law. Megan's Law says that sex offenders must register and identify themselves. Another one that, again, I don't know if this is the topic it goes under, but it's not anywhere on the list, and I feel like I get feedback that it's on the exam possibly, is a 1031 tax exchange. And that tax exchange is a way to house money temporarily if you sold your real estate. House it in an exchange program to avoid paying capital gains. It's a legal way of doing that to avoid taxation, as long as you purchase similar property within a certain period of time. So that's purchase, not leases. So those are just kind of two extra terms. Otherwise, let's talk about the relationship between the broker and the salesperson. And that's whether you're an employee or an independent contractor. Independent contractors are not required to wear certain uniforms, show up at a certain time, attend regularly scheduled team meetings. They're not required to. They may be encouraged to, but they're not required to. Where an employee is going to have a set start time, a set end time, and in exchange is going to get certain perks like maybe paid vacation, insurance, 401k matching. The list goes on. I'll be honest, I've been self-employed so long, it's hard for me to come up with a list, right? I'm used to doing all that on my own. The question around the broker responsibilities for that is, let's say I'm Amy Schaefer selling real estate, and then I decide to set up my own business entity, which some of you should maybe really consider doing. I set up a business entity now, and instead of having my commission checks cut to Amy Schaefer, they're now cut to my LLC. Does the broker owe me anything different? Does he have to start offering me a 401k match? Does he have to start offering me a vacation package or health insurance? No, nothing changes. It's still an independent contractor status. Okay, that could be one quick question out of there that some of you might encounter, is that relationship between employee and independent contractor. Otherwise, I think you've got 3, maybe 4 test question around antitrust laws. And first of all, I think you should know the definition of antitrust laws. Then I think you should know some examples of antitrust laws. And antitrust laws were put in place so that no one would interfere with the free flow of goods and services. And it reduces the idea of monopolies. Okay. If you've ever watched this series, and this is a great series, The Men Who Built America, we're talking about big names, the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, JP Morgan. We're talking about all these, Carnegie, big names of wealth that we all probably still know today, even though this is hundreds of years ago. The problem is they had so much wealth. I guess that's not really a problem for them. The problem was when, for example, Rockefeller withheld his business from Vanderbilt's railroad line and didn't stock it with his Standard Oil. That was about half of the shipments that railroad made, was half the income they made. So when Rockefeller withdrew his patronage, they went bankrupt, which means all those railway workers were out of jobs. And that alone at that time almost caused the first Great Depression. It was really the first Great Depression until something bigger and badder came along in 1929. But in the late 1800s, that almost caused the first Great Depression. So laws were put into place so that it would prevent someone like Rockefeller from going in and buying a distillery or whatever they were called, and then just shutting it down, just shutting the doors. And then all of those local workers were out of jobs. And he did it to get rid of his competition. He just felt like when somebody opened up competition, they were pirating him. And that everybody is allowed to have business, right? Everybody's allowed to open their business. Now, here's where our examples of antitrust laws come into place. Price fixing, group boycott, allocation of markets, allocation of customers, and tying agreements or tie-in agreements. Now, price fixing would be when two brokerages got together and said, you know what, a new brokerage came to town, let's not let them take any market share. Let's agree to set our commission at a flat fee of blank as a spring fling incentive to have people list with us and not the new competitor in town. That would be an idea of price fixing. And probably one of the biggest price fixing cases was with Christie's auction house in New York. They had teamed up with another auction house and agreed to set the commission of what they charged their clients to auction their goods. I think that they settled their case for over $500 million or something crazy. And the problem with that is you're not allowing the consumer to shop price and find the best value for them, okay? Number two is group boycott, and that's when someone withholds patronage. And I'm gonna say that probably your best group boycott example is gonna be Bill Gates. Bill Gates was brought ahead on a antitrust law violation with Microsoft. And he probably was not charged with the right crime or the right evidence. I'm not saying that he was guilty or not. I'm not an attorney. I don't know that much about the case. But it was over the idea that he was buying companies, or at least my understanding, buying companies, telling them that he'd pay them $1 for every computer that he put their software on. But then he wouldn't put it on any of his computers. He'd make his own software. So he bought that company really to get rid of the competition, was the accusation. Facebook, Amazon, Google, I believe there's another. They're all going through an antitrust phase right now, looking at monopolies. And it'll be interesting to see where that goes, but that might be something for you to follow moving forward. Allocation of customers and markets. This is that you're able to work with anyone and set up your business wherever you want. Up to you. The big one that I think price fixing, group boycott, and this tying agreement are probably your most likely for you to see in an exam setting. I partially say that because tying agreements is something that can also be on the state exam. But a tying agreement is when we tie two contracts together, and we force someone to do business with us in order to get the product they really want. And in real estate, it happens like this. Let's say I've got a lot listed and someone comes to me and they want to buy that lot and build a house on it. And I say, I will only sell you this lot if when you build that house and go to resell it, you give me that listing. Otherwise, if you're not going to guarantee me that listing, you can't buy this lot. I'm going to sell it to someone else. That's a tying agreement. You cannot tie two contracts together like that. Now, can that client hire me for both? Yes, they can hire me to buy it. And then to buy the lot. And then when they go to list, they can hire me again. I just cannot make a condition. It's got to be their decision. I cannot tie those two things together. Okay. So again, I think fair housing, you're going to have 4 or 5 questions there and another one on the state. I think you'll have 3 or 4 with antitrust laws. And then again, I would know your way around this employee and independent contractor as well. Again, good luck.